Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wake Up Missoula. I'm your host, Scott Ramf. Right in front of one of the few snowy days we've had in Missoula. We've basically had barely anything happening, just kind of happening in terms of snowfall in the valley here in Missoula. It just kind of feels like it's one of those lackluster winters. But overall, I've noticed that even on our snowpack, they released some reports just this last week that the snowpack in western Montana is high and at a higher percentage value than we had last year. So many of those issues of potential drought coming up this year might actually be snuffed out, because heck, even California is having record high precipitation where a lot of their drought conditions are gone too. But we're not going to get too much into that, as we're talking a little bit more about the Unified Development Code in Missoula. This is kind of like a big deal because this is going to allow for the guardrails and all this stuff for the city to allow for certain levels of development throughout the city of Missoula, not to mention transitional mixed use and FAR, which is pretty much the big contender in terms of the bigger changes and some of those more buffer areas, and trying to figure out where they can fit in more density without creating a monstrosity of a height requirements. So part of this FAR is the like floor area ratio, where it talks about a little bit of how many units on a lot, but at the same time you can't build up a certain level of height, to kind of help curb some of those concerns people have for going pretty much one of those high-story buildings. But this is where they presented on the Monday night's meeting, where it was about 4 hours long. This is where they presented to the whole city to adopt it to become compliant within the state legislator's law. Again, this is a requirement, and the townships of more than 8,000 people have to create some kind of zoning roadmap for the future development of their sites. Hey, the state of Montana is starting to read the tea leaves and starting to notice that there are going to be a lot more people moving to the state of Montana, and basically changing the game in a way of future development and zoning as a whole is kind of a big reaction to what we've been dealing with the last couple of years of a basic influx of people we've had. Not too many people as many people were fearing, but for the most part, the first year or two felt a little bit like, oh wow, some elbow room please. But so part of that had to do with, as we're talking about this, reacting to that. So now let's kick it off with the presentation with Aaron Pehan with the Housing Community Planning. Basically gave the introduction to this public hearing, which is kicking off.
Work that has been years in the making, rooted in a simple but urgent charge to update our land use rules so they reflect today's Missoula while helping us meet tomorrow's needs. From the beginning, our goals have been clear: to align our regulations with our Missoula 2045 land use plan, to modernize a code that was increasingly hard to use and even harder to administer, and to create a framework that supports more housing choices, more predictable outcomes, and better designed growth. We also set out to achieve Missoula's climate goals by encouraging more compact, efficient development patterns that make it easier to build and to live in walkable neighborhoods, with your daily needs closer to home and more options to get around without relying on a car. At its core, this effort is about ensuring more people can find safe, attainable places to live while continuing to value things that make Missoula, Missoula.
Sorry about that. Just some basic technical difficulties over here, but this is the recorded version, as I hear that my live version is not going out currently to the channel. But we're not going to worry about that right now, as the takeaway from this is the idea that the city is trying to address affordable housing demands, traditional neighborhood overlays, transitional mixed use, and creating a sense of growth that benefits all Missoulians as they tackle population growth and the growing pains associated with them. Emily Glutkin, community planner, talks about the trend in growth, and this is what she had to say about that.
Over the course of this project, we have performed some analyses that also point towards the need for an update. During the land use plan process in the earlier phases of our Missoula, we analyzed how our population has grown in the last decade. We were seeing about a 1% annual population growth for the years between 2010 and 2020. And then since the pandemic, we saw the rate of population growth in Missoula rise to nearly 2% annually, so almost double the steady rate that we saw for that decade prior.
And part of this also has to do with, if you remember, the influx of people and you were a renter during the first couple years of 2020, renter vacancy went down, and in many cases, people were left on waiting lists for openings in rental markets for months, making it harder and harder. The growth of the vehicle/camper grew in the city of Missoula because many could not get into housing or even find housing after a while, while prices began to skyrocket. With the state's calculator on home value and tax associated with those prices too, it was a perfect storm of cost of living increases with new people coming to Missoula to boot. Madsen Matthias, a community planner, talks about the current code in your neighborhood and a little bit more about some of those areas and amendment changes.
Now, part of West Broadway is changed to industrial and employment. A section of Sotupkane has been redesignated urban mixed-use low. Parks and conservation areas citywide have been aligned with the PROST plan's recommendations. Some university-owned parcels are now civic. A developing commercial node on Upper Miller Creek Road is moving to mixed use. The Upper Rattlesnake Winery has been expanded to allow additional agricultural uses, and one block in the riverfront neighborhood is shifting to mixed use.
So part of this also is, as you heard, many areas are being impacted, but probably many things will remain the same, as transitional zones will help bolster areas like West Side neighborhoods, which typically covers the large portions of land between Broadway and Reserve Streets to the north, behind Target. It really puts the area on the map of potential development, and why not, since many affordable housing options have been put there in the last couple of years. Halfway houses, you have the Trinity Navigation Center, you also have the temporary safe outdoor space that's run through the county and the Sovereign Hope Church. The city made these zonings to reflect growth as it pertains to amenities and making the most sense for the goals that are more walkable, multimodal model of transportation, because that's the fun word that they've been throwing around for the last couple of years as they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with a lot of projects, especially in the downtown area. Cassie Trepard, community planning, also talks checks and balances to some of these areas, just to make sure that just because there's going to be more density doesn't mean it's going to be targeted in certain traditional residential areas.
Housing capacity from the updated zoning map will be able to accommodate the projected population growth for the urban area through 2045. Residential opportunities are distributed through mapping of new residential and mixed-use zoning districts so that upzoning is not concentrated in vulnerable neighborhoods. As a reminder, here is what staff are recommending as comparable zoning districts to the place types adopted by City Council. Next slide. These are shown in 3 distinct categories: residential, mixed use, and special use. Residential zoning district mapping utilizes existing and planned neighborhood amenities and services, as well as environmental constraints to determine intensity of the zoning districts. Mixed use district mapping utilizes amenities and the old design excellence overlays to determine the intensity of those districts. And all of the place types have an automatic zoning district that applies to all parcels. If the place type has multiple comparable zoning districts and it meets proximity to services or design excellence overlay criteria, it will be adjusted to a higher intensity zoning district. And if constraints are present, then it will be adjusted to a lower intensity if applicable.
All right. So if there's opportunities for higher density, they'll take it. If there's something that comes up that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if anything, this made the city get their ducks in a row and public feedback over the last 3 years reflects desires for housing and the counter of high density to counter high density, and the limits on height in traditional neighborhoods to urban residential, which are more than to see a 3-story limit in place, like Franklin to the Fort, university districts in various areas of Missoula that have those layouts. During public comment on this hearing, Henry Rice, resident, thought the city could paint a better picture in the future, and this is what he had to say.
I wish it went further. I wish it said more about what we want Missoula to look like in the future, as opposed to kind of just describing what it looks like today. I really wish that the plan laid out a vision for the future, rather than just saying, here's kind of what the neighborhoods look like now, let's bump everything up by 10 or 15% or whatever, right? It doesn't really have much of a vision for what we might look like in 10 or 20 or 30 years. So I hope that next time this process happens, that we can have a lot more vision involved in it and set a standard for what Missoula really could be as a great city.
Yeah, And the unfortunate nature of the city and zoning as a whole is that zoning isn't like talk about the architectural work of the thing. And the main points were, state compliance and guidelines for development. Not to be confused with certain overlays that have certain restrictions on place type zoning, reuse of some of the older buildings. But, John Altenger, Rattlesnake neighborhood. Oh man, I totally butchered that last name. But he spoke about the open space as a tool to deter higher density development. So this is what he had to say.
Our understanding is that Missoula's open space zoning is for preserving natural lands, parks, and conservation areas, allowing uses like parks, trails, community gardens, and potentially limited public facilities while restricting intense development. While we are very much in favor of the Peas Farm remaining a community garden for a long time in the future, our primary interest is in the Duncan Drive playing field, so that's the focus of these comments. Our goal is to ensure the Duncan Drive playing field remains a playing field for the long term. We know there are a lot of parks within the city limits that have been sold or given to the city to be managed by City Parks and Rec, and we fully support that happening with the playing field.
All right, so part of this also has to do with the PROST, which is the projects associated with green space here in Missoula, how they're incorporating Parks and Rec within the city zoning and planning to help bolster those kind of green spaces and quote unquote have a park within 15 minutes of walking distance for anyone in the city limits. And that's just a big part of this, and many neighborhoods further from the city center, like Rattlesnake neighborhoods, have open space instead of dedicated parks with the city and rec handle. They are very particular about keeping their neighborhood the same, and many have brought up concerns about high density and getting access for emergency services on the pretty much narrow Rattlesnake Road that connecting the neighborhoods in the first place, because you only have one main road. You might have a secondary road that goes up through Greeno, but other than that, that's more like you have to be somewhat navigating to get through around there. But for the most part, it's pretty much like a funnel for a lot of people coming in and out of that place. And, as we're speaking about funnels and kind of areas that are kind of shoved in the corner, East Missoula is yet another example of an area here in Missoula that's not technically part of the city of Missoula, but the city of Missoula has a lot of influence in the future development of a certain site they call Aspire. So Andrew Hurst, East Missoula resident, talks about the lack of input from them, and it's kind of true, since most of East Missoula is not represented in the city of Missoula, despite the name.
The East Missoula residents have not been included in this process up to now, which is very disturbing, up until we got that notice and jumped in and say, hey, what's going on here? So what's the remedy to that? I'm hoping that City Council will take seriously the comments that they're getting from East Missoula residents in support of the Consolidated Planning Board's proposed amendments specific to East Missoula. If you lived in the Aspire parcel, which was part of the city, you could have had, you would have received the mailer, but of course nobody's there because it's not developed yet. So technically nobody should have received the mailer, and I'm so glad that we did, because here we are tonight letting you know that we're very concerned, and that's all I got.
All right. And that's definitely brings up a pretty good point, because a lot of times here even neighborhood councils have more say in what happens within the city of Missoula than communities on the outliers like East Missoula. East Missoula as a future is on a strange tightrope with the new neighborhood being built and the county essentially pushing for city development and annexation of the parcel of land before people have even moved in. So they've covered both the city and county meetings with folks from that communities expressing concerns about not being listened to. While legally the city can zone this property to fill in the many gaps they need to keep up with the new development, but I'd rather not get into it, as this is about the UDC, not so much about the Aspire development in East Missoula. So Shibu Aaron's Front Step Community Land Trust talks about the lack of affordability. So affordability, it's on everyone's mind. Everybody wants affordable housing. The current rates of everything is just more and more expensive, and the concept of affordability is just something that is it's a reality that many people think that, oh, we're going to have things earmarked for affordability, but that's basically the incarnation of what you would create ghetto situations, unfortunately, because we want to make sure that all housing across the city and across the city of Missoula is all going down together, rather than just being, oh wait, these people have lower cost of living, and then higher density, and then you have urban areas which higher density and stuff like that. But part of this, that's the weird issue with when it comes to affordability, is like we want affordable housing, but we also are lacking supply, which is one of the big things that part of this is try to help and address, is that we're growing, but these are just guardrails to make sure that the growth goes to where we want it to go, rather than just going to, oh, there's a lot of land, let's build a monstrosity of an apartment complex. But without further ado, here is one of the more public comment on this.
Right now in Missoula, you need roughly twice the median income to buy the median home. That gap is at the root of the crisis. Because of that gap, even our limited subsidy dollars are increasingly going to households earning 100% or 120% of the median income. People who in a healthy market wouldn't need assistance at all. When the private market fails to produce enough modest middle-income housing, it forces our public dollars to stretch thinner and thinner. The way we fix that is this process, by allowing more homes of different sizes, types, and price points to be built, especially in walkable, transit-served parts of the city. Flexibility in building size, height, and mixed-use design is not a giveaway to developers. It's how we create more homes that real Missoulians can afford. The amendments proposed by Pro Housing Missoula move an already strong draft code further in that direction. They make it easier to build neighborhood shops with homes above, small apartment buildings, and compact infill housing where people already live and want to live. If Missoula takes bold steps with this code, we can start closing the gap between what people earn and what homes cost.
Yep, that's what they call the cost of living adjustment. And COLA, which is a big part of it too. And one of the many things that the city has refused to do up until this point has had the affordability housing component to the Unified Development Code. And staff fears requirements would prevent developers of market rate housing to create any housing at all. So, however unfair, the stock is the ultimate goal to keep up with demand. Developers' dollars get stretched too, making it hard to justify some of the lower costs without building more units, which even those units are going to be just as expensive as a whole. Otherwise, they'd have to figure out a new pay scale where half the density, where the higher density part of it gets more affordability, while the more traditional homes on the other side of that lot has to pay for those. So everything has to pay for each other in that specific zone of area, and you have to unbalance the scales for higher cost for one group of people, with the other group of people having a lower cost but smaller units. So it's weird, because if you're trying to make two houses that look exactly the same, you have to make sure that they're relatively the same price as the market is. So as the meeting continued, we had comments from many neighborhoods expressing concerns of infill, lack of amenities, and access for emergency vehicles in the event of more development. Trees, climate, and other folks wanting to make sure Missoula's urban forest remains healthy. This was a 4-hour meeting. I covered a good basis of what a lot of people were talking about, but we're going to talk about the Land Use and Planning Committee meeting that happened on Wednesday, in which they're trying to add some more amendments, and talk a little bit more about incorporating this plan to the greater Our Missoula growth policy, and just kind of going back to the drawing, not necessarily going all the way back to the drawing board, but going back to be like, okay, what can we adjust here at this point? Because it seems like most of the adjustments are between FAR, the floor area ratio of how many units can be on lots of lands, and I talked a little bit about it last week. But as we get into the dirty details, some community members spoke about certain special zoning privileges East Missoula got despite not being a part of city limits. So Andrew Hurst comments on that from public comment.
Appears that at the end of 2020, the map still reflected East Missoula at large, which is not being rezoned currently, but it had a future place type of neighborhood mixed use. And then currently, it is now slated to be urban residential high. And I'm curious what drove staff's or the project team's decision to move from mixed use to urban residential high, given that it seems like the only thing that's changed between 2020 and now is that the Aspire subdivision got approved and annexed, and they have a special zoning that, even though it's RT 5.4, which corresponds directly to LUR2, has that NCA overlay. And I'm wondering if that had any place in the project team's decision for the place type that they assigned to East Missoula at large, even though that's currently out of, quote unquote, out of jurisdiction.
Yep, so that's one of the kind of like the mini issues when it comes to zoning as a whole, especially when you start going to areas that are not within the city limits. And while the county has less zoning requirements, the city has some in, say, in areas near Missoula that require certain guidelines to follow as they hook up public utilities like sewer or water. Mike Nugent, City Council, talks about transitional zoning and creating buffers, which also gives an example out of Missoula's own policy as it pertains to the Villaggio on the north side.
I have up right now is the Villaggio, which is one of the two largest permanently affordable low-income housing tax credit projects that Missoula has accomplished in the last 6 to 8 years. They're also some of the largest in the state. I was on the Housing Authority board when this project started, before I was on City Council. And the reason that I bring this up is I was very familiar with the design process for that building, for that project. And they, the landowners, the Housing Authority, the architects all wanted several smaller buildings, much like code calls for, because, they're more aesthetically pleasing. But as the project went on, they found that they couldn't afford it. And my concern is that that's a UR2 district. So if that was the current zoning when that project came forward, we would not have 200 permanently affordable units, because it just wouldn't pencil for a housing authority project. If it doesn't pencil for a housing authority project, I think that it's reasonable to be concerned about that in other areas as well.
Yep. So, as Mike Nugent kind of went on about that, he wanted to be clear that there are no plans in place, and then there are these projects that are created as opportunities shown. This was used as an example of not being able to create individual parcels and limiting factors from cost to affordability components. Sorry, a lot of buzzwords there, but Cassie Tripar talks about those more surface areas and how FAR very much, pretty much a predominant topic on trying to fill in some of those gaps, talks a little bit more about this as well.
There's a point where, although FAR does on, say, the typical parcel or common parcels mitigate scale of building, once you get to those occasional very large parcels in different districts, that's sort of what this tool starts to protect for, where those buildings could get very large because the FAR would allow a lot of gross floor area.
Follow up. And looking at it from Ward 3, although we have some large lots, that will also be very densely zoned. Are there other parts of the city specifically that you're thinking of where there are large lots and it is more in the UR2 or UR1 category? Because could you flesh that out for me? Like, what are we thinking about?
Yeah, our parcel sizes on average are actually a little larger in UR1 and UR2 than you'd find in UR3 or UR4. Also in Missoula, people are allowed to buy abutting lots and create one development parcel out of it. So even if you have smaller platted lots, if someone's able to buy, 4 or so of them next to each other, you can get a pretty big parcel that the FAR would be based on.
And the unfortunate nature of a lot of these new projects that are coming out of the woodworks is the overall demand has just created this whole source for the challenges of UDC from FAR, traditional mixed use, which at face value seem like they're going to be the biggest factors, but if anything will be used to offer solutions to developers looking to leverage more units on lots across Missoula's urban residential area without towering over other homes and structures, since they are going to try to create this cap for height requirements, but utilizing the lots a little bit wider, but at the same time reducing the parking requirements. And this overall does not exclude some of your more traditional neighborhoods from getting more density, but it does allow for placed zoned urban residential to be called upon essentially for those higher density projects overall, which would have approval by City Council and have some period of time to argue. And so one example I can think of is definitely like 7th or 8th Street, kind of like those weird things just off of Reserve Street, thinking that, we're creating more density in these areas, but by proxy, more traffic in and out of the neighborhood that roughly could only hold about 5 homes all at once. And they're asking to build in more density in that small sector. And so a lot of that was kind of like poo-pooed and actually just kind of not only just like it was technically denied by the city. So higher density off of Reserve, off of I believe it was 7th or 8th or even 9th Street for all I know. One of those things just kind of petering off of Reserve Street, and there's kind of small little corridor type areas. It's like I like to think of it as like pocket neighborhoods popped up kind of just really awkwardly off of Reserve Street. So if you ever get a chance to drive Reserve, you can see a couple of those driveways and then some of those homes that are just off the road. And it's like, oh, wow, so you know that they're trying to think about doing suburban areas in the area at the time, but years later they created this whole like mega road that connects the highways. So, before I wrap up, I did want to mention that this meeting was over 6 hours. And I got a fair amount of information, but I actually wanted to save the lion's share of this meeting for next week because Martin Luther King Day and all the community meetings are kind of softened up for next week. So technically, city has the week off next week, while they technically don't. But ultimately, the city will have another week to comb this over and vote on the Unified Development Code for the 26th. It seems like most of the other things are on the level in terms of what they want to do for the coding reform and stuff like that. It just, the middleman buffers like transitional zoning, transitional mixed use. What I mean is, it's kind of crazy with a lot of things going on here, but it seems like a lot of the guardrails are pretty much in place, but with FAR, the floor area ratio, and the transitional mixed use, which used to be industrial mixed use, which is what they used to effectively transition the north side urban industrial areas into more of that transitional use where you have all those new buildings, a new park that's being built right now, and then you have the Rivara project, which is a big deal happening with the community land trust and whatnot. And it's just very interesting to kind of see how things have changed over just the last 5 years compared to what it has been with our Missoula growth policy for 2020, and now this is going to be something that's going to be implemented for 2045. But I also, before I ultimately wrap up the City Council report, I did also want to mention that these are guidelines, and any kind of changes can be done as they go along. They will need like a majority vote from the City Council, but for the most part, part of this will add a level of flexibility in which the city will get a final say on whether or not higher density is available, and which will give plenty of people a chance to be engaged. And Missoula has definitely one of the most engaged people when it comes to city council in the first place. So in terms of like ratio and percentage-wise and input, because they've had many meetings on the Unified Development Code, and I think that one of the things is that it got so important for a lot of the people, even within the city of Missoula, that even communities on the kind of the outliers like Bonner, East Missoula, Frenchtown, Lolo, and many others of those communities are very much like starting to feel the pressure of higher density and higher development happening in the city of Missoula, and how it's kind of trickling into outwards to these other communities across Missoula County as a whole. But we're going to talk a little bit more about this, and hopefully have this wrapped up by the end of January before the city starts talking about the fiscal year 2027 budget. So up next, we have a clip from Your Missoula talk show speaking with folks from Empower Montana about the MLK Day celebration happening next Monday, pretty much all day.
Continue to carry on. So this year's dinner, which will, as Heidi said, the torch is being handed down to me by Murray, and I and myself, Marilyn Gomez, and Brandon Pinnell, and other volunteers are picking that up, and we'll be preparing the dinner. And except for this year, the dinner has a different spin on it, because before it's been Pan-African, we're going Pan-Caribbean. I have Caribbean roots. Okay. Murray always speaks to the diaspora coming from Africa and then coming to the new land, so to say. But there was a leg of that trip that dumped off many, and sadly in the Caribbean, Central South America, and Eastern Mexico. So shedding some light and some history through food from those places, and the impact, good, bad, and indifferent, through culinary delights, conversation, and mid-evening engagement later on.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yes.
And one cool thing is, it's just a few blocks from Holiday Inn, so there is a bit of a stroll, but we'll also have a shuttle that can give folks a ride from the celebration at the Holiday Inn to the social.
Oh,
And people can leave their
nice.
cars parked at the Holiday Inn parking lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
It's
there's
big.
some
I walk through it every
changes,
day. It's big.
but it's really exciting, and we have amazing musicians. Andre Floyd and Josh Farmer will be playing music. We also have a community choir that comes together just for MLK.
Right.
It'll be 30 to 40 people. We have 2 keynote speakers, Damian Chase Begay, here from Missoula, and also a young person, Blake Schulte, who's a junior at Sentinel. And then we'll have the presentation of the Youth Art and Essay Awards.
I see this is called Lynn Schwenke Youth Art and Essay Awards.
Yes.
That's like in honor of a donor?
That's in honor of Lynn Schwenke, who worked at the Missoulian for years.
Yeah, Lynn and Bill, and they
Yep.
would come to spelling bees too. They'd be
Yeah.
like the judges or something.
She was the force behind the Youth Art and Essay Contest
Mhm.
for years, and so we renamed the Youth Art and Essay Contest to just honor Lynn and her dedication
Oh,
to
that's
youth
sweet.
voice, education, and social justice.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So part of this and their theme, they always have a quote every year from Martin Luther King Jr. And this is the quote for this year's celebration here in Missoula. One of the longest running MLK celebrations in the nation, mind you. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. So that's the quote that's carrying forward with this year. And as we're getting into our other segments and other topics here in Missoula, we're going to talk a little bit more about movies that are coming out this weekend. It's time for a Pre-Critic, where I prejudge movies based on my biases towards movies as a whole. And kicking things off is 28 years later, The Bone Temple. From a film series that asks the question, how much further can we push the zombies onto people? Watch as we bring the previous story about a boy who learns to live on the land, gets swept up into a blonde wig tracksuit cult, while at the same time, some creepy doctor working with the afflicted of the rage virus. The rage virus, fast zombies. It's basically like rabies. And understand human nature from the monsters, or whatever deep meaning these movies try to connect while their world is pretty much over. So should the franchise be, hey, 28 Days Later was fun, I guess, but they just kind of just franchised it. Dead Man's Wire. So an engineer type makes a dead man's wire that would kill the main character if he doesn't do the thing that he's told to do before the time runs out. Make sense? This is one of those 1977 period pieces. He's just a guy who's just trying to survive society. Some guy straps a makeshift like shotgun to him and be like, if you don't do this thing, I'll hit a button and you die. If you don't do all this thing, so he makes him do all sorts of crazy things to avoid basically dying. It's very much like, they always do these kind of movies every 10, 15 years or so, where it's like, I only have so much time to live. I gotta do things that get out of my comfort zone. And it's usually targets like the quiet guy and yeah, that kind of stuff. All right, Private Life. When a therapist goes above and beyond the help of a murdered patient, mystery and other things in this Jodie Foster film that True Detective never scratched that itch for mystery plots. Watch this lady uses her unassuming nature to get to the bottom of this, because one only knows that your therapist will stick around even after you're gone. Then we got a thing called Night Patrol, where police get in the way over their heads in LA by day, but by night they are creatures, vampires. So yeah, it's a vampire movie from the perspective of cops teaming up with seemingly gang-related inner-city folks as they reveal the underworld of LA. So more of enemies turn allies against a bigger threat in the end that is probably like, I never saw it that way before. And then we have All You Need Is Kill. Interesting title, but this is an anime, and animes are always interesting if you get to the meat and potato of everything. I don't know why I say that. I don't know. I'm making it insane, but we have an anime that inspired Edge of Tomorrow, otherwise known as the Tom Cruise Groundhog sci-fi movie about a main character who relives the end of humanity race over and over again until she gets it right enough to save the world and probably some personal relationship she made along the way. Stories like this usually end with the hero saving everyone and no one not knowing it, no one not knowing that they did it in the first place. So there you go. It's very cerebral, and the same thing happens with like those sci-fi, any sci-fi or fantasy movies when they become more, what's that called? Story bankrupt, where they just can't think of a story to come up with, so they just kind of be like, let's throw a time travel plot into it. But of course, up next we have another cool Winter Daze video, so about some art thieves here in the city, art thieves here in the library. So this is a video that I was also a part of, so you get a little cameo with me. But here are some of those wacky kids from our Winter Daze Camp.
Hi everybody, welcome to the library. This has many different works from all ages, all of time, some more valuable than others, so you want to be very diligent about the books. And why do you have a crowbar?
It's my emotional support crowbar.
Do you know what you just said? That was extremely rude and insensitive. When she lost her first crowbar, she didn't recover for 5 years. Let's get a move on.
Okay, let's move on. Come on, everyone.
I'll finish this in only half an hour. No, here, I got it. No, I see something. Okay, no, take away.
Why'd you have to bring her?
Because my parents said if I didn't bring her to everything I have to do this week, they'd double my chores and take money out of my allowance.
Yikes. All right, that's fair. All right, come on, let's go.
I think it's up here.
Yeah, it should be. The critical spot should be this line here, and this will lead us to that weak wall so we can break into the vault.
All right, well, let's get in.
So,
Yeah, just like that. Yeah, perfect.
Break the lock.
Is it that thing? Oh, no.
Here.
Hey, thank you. Go back.
That's not it.
Is it in they give away toys?
This says the type of bit. Okay, that is talking about the third workshop on the 4th floor. They're fixing the frame for it right now. That means it won't be behind security. This won't be as hard as I planned it out to be. All right.
Wait.
Let's head up there. Should be in here. Yeah, I think so. Maybe they put it somewhere else.
Yeah, well, it would be good if it was in this room. Nobody's here.
Here, let's check over here real quick. Can you, do something?
Don't worry, she'll tire herself out eventually. She's just a little crazy right now.
Okay, well, I guess she'll probably be able to catch up with us.
All right.
Oh, hey, you're not authorized to be in here.
No, yeah, we are. We're on a library trip. Field trip. We're here on important business. What are we gonna do?
Why is there a little girl for nothing?
Go on without me! Why'd you do it? Why'd you do a little girl? I did it! It's her emotional support crowbar!
That doesn't make any sense!
She What? Yes, she does! I don't know! Stop!
I'll keep going until you tell me why you're here!
What do you have for lunch today? Bean and cheese burrito and it's coming back up!
Should be in here. Oh, there it is. I got it. All right, let's go.
My crowbar.
Can't believe you found it. Here, take this. It's close enough to a crowbar.
I'm telling Mom you lost my crowbar.
You're the one who got it taken away by the police when you got caught. All right, before the cops get us. What are you doing? This way. Come on.
Where are your friends? They're probably out of this city, out of this state, out of this country, out of this continent, probably out of this planet.
How'd they get such high-tech weaponry? Tell us.
Hey, we're here to rescue you. No, save yourselves. Actually, I made that mistake.
You were after the Citadu Bay after all. What? Painting. Oh my gosh, it disappeared.
Oh my gosh, you're here. Let's get out of here. Come save me. Come save me. I'm not getting up for myself. I'm too dizzy.
I need the crowbar! Run! You hurry up. Last time I saw a Bluey episode, and we had to share something. So I think we should just share the painting. Actually, where will we put the painting? Because the walls aren't really big.
Hi. I'm waiting for the elevator too. I gotta catch up to some criminals. They're stealing a painting.
Oh, wow.
Really?
They must suck.
They're stealing a painting from you?
Oh, okay. Well, this is our.
Yeah.
Is the
I'll get it. I'll get it. Oh, wait. No.
second floor? We gotta return to the tour group right now.
Concluded the tour of Missoula Public Library. We got some really cool stuff. You can check out many of the items here at the library. Oh, where'd you guys go?
The back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a long one.
Well, what's the deal with the painting?
Are you kidding me? That is her emotional support painting. Are we gonna have to go over this all again? Yeah, leave her alone. Back off, y'all.
Now that we're done corralling those kids this year, I do want to mention that we're going to be doing our Spring Flicks Camp coming out this April. MCPS has updated their calendar for a spring break to happen April 6th through the 11th. The normal spring break that's happening for the university and most other places are the March 16th through the 20th. So look out for those dates moving forward. We're also going to be posting our summer camp days at summer camp sign up sometime next month. But for now, we're going to kick things off with some kind of like news and things that are happening around the state of Montana. An AI copyright suit has reached a settlement here in Montana. This is one of many states that got into this AI lawsuit against an organization called Claude AI, which created books based on past works of deceased authors like Jim Harrison, known for Legends of the Fall, and Dalva. Things got pretty uncomfortable, and this was for a $1.5 billion settlement. And the settlement roughly amounts to $3,000 per title, split evenly between the author or the author's estate and the book publisher, according to the Authors Guild. Summaries concerns that the settlement's one-time compensation is insufficient. $3,000. AI and all the money that's being put behind it is in the billions. $1.5 billion to them, it kind of feels like it's chump change at this point. With the amount of money being invested and the perceived by Wall Street to essentially replace many middle white-collar workers compared to the automation that replaces blue-collar workers, this is just a drop in the bucket from tech companies being valued in the trillions. The problem with the settlement tends to be negotiating and throwing a wet blanket over justice and imposing strict and not having any kind of regulation, most resulting in payoffs and some admission of guilt. Joshua Love, a Los Angeles-based copyright attorney and partner in Reed Smith's entertainment and media industry group, is hopeful that the writers in Montana and beyond will eventually be able to share in AI company profits. Sharing is relative, and frankly, this is just one of many issues coming out of the transformative technology that is basically rewriting our social contract. Is like, I mean, why would you want to waste so much time coming up with programs and other things that when you just prompt something to be like, oh, I want you to do this for me, and then it does it for you, like creating a website. Those kind of things are pretty interesting to kind of have those kind of things in place, because the relative ease of this kind of technology is the same thing with the incarnation of the car, which replaced the horses, not because they taxed people for all the horse manure in some of those more urban areas, but associated with making it easier for people to make the option to choose to go to cars. So very much like in there's aesthetic, if there's a better technology, people will use it and people could be moving forward. And then there's some modern marvels that old ancient technology is great for that as well. But as we're talking about this and that, the local baseball team Paddleheads opted to go full synthetic turf as they expected it to follow like Washington Grizzly Stadium and that 10-year-old synthetic turf at Fort Missoula Regional Park. They thought this was a cost-saving measure. However, as more research comes out and on those forever plastics, many Missoulians, some from the Seniors for a Livable Climate and others from City Council themselves, opted to get in on the decision that requires our local government for approval, since it's the City of Missoula and the taxpayers who technically own the baseball field. From Missoula current Jeremy Drake of Montana Plastic Free said artificial turf goes against much of what the city has already supported, and the rattle off about all the resolutions and plans passed by the City of Missoula in the past 5 years that don't support installing artificial turf in the city parks. They include a resolution to regulate single-use plastics, a climate action resiliency resolution, the land use plan, and the 0 by 50 waste plan, which Drake helped author. So Jeremy Drake and the key ingredient of the plastics, or PFAS, which are the forever chemicals that not only able to they don't recycle, but require certain efforts to clean areas that have installed those. While there were meetings at Free Cycles, they also used a thermal camera to measure the temperature of the artificial turf at Big Sky High School, which is also one of the many artificial turfs across this city of Missoula. With 1.2 acres of the football field covered in synthetic turf, they found it 25 degrees hotter than neighboring grass fields. And in 2024, Missoula had 22 days with temperatures above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. In many ways, Missoula's attempt to be 0 by 2050, or more likely 2100, is a counter to many of these green initiatives the city's worked with Climate Smart Missoula to implement, deconstruction, to recycle, and to save money of materials that would otherwise wind up in the landfill. One of the other key arguments against this particular field was the proximity to the river, potentially contaminated Clark Oak River, which contributes to 80% of the water in Missoula's aquifer. Then those numbers are based on Logo McInnes with the engineer for Missoula City Water Utility. And, you know, that's just one of the many things that are happening. And, you know, it's going to be a lot of back and forth trying to figure out the best solution. For the most part, the synthetic turf, the whole point that they just wanted a cheaper solution so they didn't have to consistently maintain the grass. And the Mumford & Son concert was pretty much a flashpoint in many people's minds, because when they hosted a concert, they had to delay the minor league baseball game as a result. Which, you know, when you delay things, it costs money because you have to refund tickets, you have to change things up, and a lot of things happening with that. So as we're talking about other things and things like that, we're going to talk a little bit about politics. As much as I don't like talking about politics, this is kind of a big deal since the University of Montana's president, Seth Bodnar, is running for a senator against Steve Daines in this upcoming election, trying to unseat him. But he's not running as a Democrat, but he's still being backed by John Tester, but he's running as an independent. And so that's the big news that just dropped through Montana Free Press. Being a UM president for nearly a decade, he's had his eyes on the Senator Steve Daines seat. A Tester who lost to Tim Sheehy last election fully endorsed Bodnar at the frustration with the modern Democratic Party under Chuck Schumer, and Jim Jeffries, my bad. But while Montana has had Democratic governors and senators in the past with overwhelming majorities, the tide shifted to Montana with the 2016 election. Trump, notwithstanding, has influenced many blue waves over the last couple months with special elections and even splitting the Dem votes with Mamdani, the socialist candidate in New York, taking New York's mayor job. While New York is more blue, no matter who, than Montana, Montana saw many shifts to the right as John Tester's campaign aimed at Trump voters to vote for him as well. His record and efforts for veterans struck a chord, and he worked with Republicans to major legislators to support exposed to toxic chemicals from burn pits to Agent Orange. This pivot went from what Brian Schweitzer, former governor, who suggested the push for an independent Senate candidate, was being driven by the consultant industrial complex. That is to say, basically, they're just trying to figure out what is going to please the most people without rubbing people the wrong way. Professional campaign analysts capable of organizing sufficient third-party investments from political action committees. And regardless of what the party lines you draw, independence is at the core of Montana values, as both parties have had hard times trying to meet constituents halfway, where Republicans have been in the hot seat the last year or so. Democrats tend to trip over their own campaign success trying to appeal to everyone while not appealing to the people that they represent. In the post-conversation interview with Montana Free Press, according to what they said, Tesser said, quote, "Things have changed. There are too many people in the party right now that don't think I have any value, and I'm okay with that," end quote. Oof. Talk about like getting the Democratic endorsement to dismissiveness of their own party. And that's definitely a staunch comparison. But as we're kind of bringing it back more to Missoula news, I wanted to mention that MCPS is kind of going through some weird transitional periods the last 2 years, a lot of turnover, a lot of different things. And board chairwoman for the MCPS, Juanita Old Person, has vacated her seat. And so she's one of the, from what I remember when I used to cover MCPS about almost a decade ago, she was the newbie, and then by now she's basically become the old guard, while many of the people who have traditionally been on the Board of Trustees have rotated. And according to this, one of the board members here that had said that they've seen a rotation of 19 different faces over the last 2 years. And many of these requirements, many of the people who go into the Board of Trustees, most of them have like a 2-3 year term, and they tend to cover certain districts of Missoula, and they give a nice perspective. Like school boards are very much like city councils, but they talk about the future of your children. So, you know, the board also held an update from the Facilities Planning Committee, part of an ongoing review of district-owned properties, according to NBC Montana. The committee's work builds on months of public engagement that include building tours, surveys, and meetings with more than 200 community members and partners such as the City of Missoula and the University of Montana. So they're a very crucial part, and with all these turnovers, it's hard to stay fairly consistent on basically who to talk to and what's going on. So, yeah, I mean, there's even a lot of things going on right now because they had a 4-hour meeting last Tuesday. I don't talk too much about MCPS stuff, but they're talking about selling a lot of their properties to help leverage some of their new assets moving forward. And a lot of people are kind of like not happy with the prospects of MCPS selling some of their land because a lot of ways is that they used it to leverage and work with other communities. They've traded land swaps with the city and the University of Montana for $1, and they have this memorandum of understanding to allow for these kind of trades to happen for the betterment of their community. Because a lot of these public institutes, when you start selling some of their land and stuff like that, you lose a part of the potential that could be there, and also that it's already there. So it's just a very weird thing, and you know that having land assets and being able to all those kind of things too, because this is an ongoing thing. Like a lot of new members there. A lot of people are not knowing exactly kind of what's going on, and they're just trying to get an idea of what's happening with MCPS, and so they want to figure out what they want to do moving forward. And you know, while they're doing all that stuff, you know, like we get these people to represent us to kind of take care of all the headache work for us. Here are some of the things that you can do here in the community. Here are some of the events that are happening in and around the city of Missoula, starting with pickleball, skills and drills, starting at 9 a.m. at the Lifelong Learning Center. Stroller Strive and Mommy and Me workout class at Bonner Park at 9:30 Fridays and weekdays. Little club play group at Sports Barn at 10 a.m. They have open curling at Glacier Ice Rink, so if you're interested in curling and being one of the easiest ends to the Olympics, that's the way to do it. Missoula Food Bank meal distribution at 10 a.m. This is an ongoing thing that happens pretty much daily in the city of Missoula. Tiny Tales at Missoula Public Library every Friday at 10:30. Pre-school play time at Roots Acro Sports Center every Friday at 10:45. Lunch on the Missoula Senior Center is a great way for people to engage with each other. They also have a lunch service at the Paul Varela Center, including breakfast and dinner every single day. Lunch service at Missoula Senior Center is only Monday through Friday. Yarns and Watercolor at noon every Friday at the Missoula Public Library. They also have an All Abilities Art Club at Base. These are people living with disabilities or anyone interested in learning more about their services, starting at 1 p.m. Hands-on Science Math Week at Spectrum Discovery Center, so they're all about math. Youth Adults Writers Group at Missoula Public Library. If you're interested in writing and you're wanting to improve some of your writing and you're a young adult, teenager, this is the place to do it every Friday at 3:30 p.m. The Cosmos, from the Big Bang to the End of Time, University of Montana Payne Family Native American Center is hosting the Cosmos at 6 p.m. and another one at 7 p.m. to benefit astronomy and all that sorts of fun stuff about space. D&D Guilds for Adults. This is Missoula Public Library, hosted online for anybody interested in dipping their toe in Dungeons and Dragons. Karaoke at the Jack Saloon, 7 p.m. Swing class at Showtime Academy at 7 p.m. Ken Ludwig's Moon Over Buffalo to MCT at 7:30 p.m. This is their PG-13 show. They do a community show every year. One of them is a little bit more adult-oriented, and it's based in the 1950s, and stage actors George and Harlot Hay, known for the spotlight on them, is fading as they desperately try to hold on to their fame, each with differing visions how their lives will play out, and revelations of George's affair with a young starlet and the faithful call to the famous Frank Capra may just revive their careers as it ends their marriage. So that's what's happening at MCT this weekend and next. Jazz Artist Series, Brad Lilly Quartet and MJO at the ZAC at 7:30 p.m. Kimberly Carlson Trio at the Old Post at 7:30. Unico Entertainment presents K-pop Demon Hunters at Monks at 9 p.m. So they're doing dances inspired by the music there. Yeed at the Top Hat, which is Yee EDM, which is electronic music, playing there as well. Saturday, the Clark Fork River Markets at Badlander and Locals only. Missoula Valley Winter Market at the Southgate Mall, starting at 9 a.m. And then Badlander and Locals only hosting the Clark Fork River Market at 9 p.m. Line dancing at the Missoula Senior Center at 10 a.m. on Saturday. Makerspace Walking Arrows here at the Missoula Public Library from about 10 to 2 p.m. Multi-age workshop, Portraits and Polaroids at the Missoula Art Museum. Nice, fun workshop. They always try to engage people with art. They usually meet in the basement of the Missoula Art Museum. MCAT Saturday drop-ins here in the studio every single Saturday from 3 to 1 p.m. Saturday Tiny Tales have their afternoon meeting at 3 p.m. in the afternoon here at the Missoula Public Library on the second floor. Makerspace Mend a Friend Pet Toy Repair at 3 p.m. If you want to learn how to fix your own stuffed animals, 3 p.m. here at the Missoula Public Library's Makerspace. Opening reception at the Tyler Kowalski Bob's Your Uncle Art Show at 5 p.m. on Saturday night. John Florides is going to play at Giraffe Works at 7 p.m. Second annual Say Gay Plays, so this is the Montana Repertory Theater and Western Montana LGBTQ Center, are working together to feature plays with several LGBTQ themed short plays selected from catalog created by Voyage Theater Company and some selected by the Rep. Titles include Montana by Emily Feldman, The Dungeons and Dragons, Our Effing Play, Couch Surfing, Boy Talk, Words the Wind Carried Me, and all ticket sales will be directly benefiting the Western Montana LGBT Community Center in Missoula, and that's happening tonight and this weekend at 7:30 p.m. Foundation Entertainment presents Duffy Chimera, playing electronic music at Monks at 8 p.m. Saturday. Folklore Society is doing their contra dance at Elks Lodge Room on Saturday night. Dueling Pianos at Stave and Hoop at 8 p.m. Karaoke at Westside Lanes at 9 p.m. West Prairie Rose playing some music at the Sunrise Saloon, some country there. Chris Moon every Saturday at the Badlander, and then Sunday they got their Stitch and Bitch at the studio at the Space DIY studio at noon. Winter Sunday beginning pottery at Clay Studio at 1 p.m. Queer Prom at the Montana LGBTQ Center. They're doing a murder mystery at 3 p.m. And then NFL Bingo at Tamarack at 5, Dram Tough Trivia at the Dram Shop at 6 p.m., Jazz at Draftworks at 6 p.m., Western Union Dance Party at the ZAC at 7 p.m., Comedy at the VFW at 8 p.m., Rocking Karaoke at Sunrise Saloon to wrap up your Sunday. And for wrapping up my show, I definitely want to thank you guys for joining me this morning. I have a little bit more time to kind of end things. A lot of things happening. We got MLK Day next week. We got my radio show, MCAT Radio, every Monday for you guys. You can check that out. We're live on the radio, 101.5 every Monday at noon, where we just talk about whatever comes to mind. So without further ado, for Wake Up Missoula, I'm Scott Raff. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend.